What's up, everybody? Wow. I just enjoyed episode 7 and 8 of The Last Dances. I'm sure you did. Man, I can't say enough about this documentary. I saw, I think it was JJ Watt, I think, tweeted out a week or so ago that 10 episodes won't be enough. And I tend to agree with JJ because this has been phenomenal. And I'm looking forward to discussing it with you guys. Before I get into my 4 points from each episode, 7 and 8, man, how about the soundtrack? I mean, I alluded to it before, but this soundtrack is phenomenal. Um, I'm bad down with the king. The choice is yours. Uh, the hip hop has just been phenomenal, and I'm loving it. Even step into the world, into a world with KRS One. So, kudos to whoever put the soundtrack together. They've been jamming, and then also I think this, in my view, off the top of my head, I think these episodes 7 and 8 had the best footage from that 97-98 season. MJ in practice talking trash, talking to Scott Burrell. This is when you finally got to see him and how he interacted with his teammates in practice. And then even, in the locker room with the baseball bat and the cigar. I just thought this was the best footage from the 97-98 season. Up to this point, a lot of it was the best stuff was just going back and talking about MJ's career before that season, which still was great in this one, but I thought the footage was definitely better. So anyway, let me get into my 4 points. The first point, which is interesting, being that this is Mother's Day, and happy Mother's Day to all the wonderful women out there and the women and mothers in your life if you're a male. And also for me, I lost my father-in-law 3 weeks ago to COVID-19. And so I'm actually going to his burial tomorrow morning. So interesting that my first point with those two things in consideration is the power of fatherhood. And I thought it was great that you saw how close Michael Jordan was with his dad and the impact his dad had on him. And even to the point where he said, in ninth grade as a freshman in high school, he got suspended like three times, and it was his dad sitting him down as only a dad can and telling him, look, you're not headed in the right direction. And my guess is that he told him very sternly. And so I thought that was powerful. And I know in our country, it's a massive fatherlessness crisis. A lot of people focus on the African American community, and it's bad in our community. It's roughly 75% of children born without their father in the home, but it's bad. It's all throughout America. It's now roughly half of the children in America of any race are born without the father in the home. And so I just want to say, I know there are a lot of reasons for that. There are a lot of systemic reasons that can contribute to that. But I would like to say to every man out there who has children, man, you got to do your best to be in the life of your child. Mothers do a tremendous job. And I have twin daughters, and having daughters or children, period, has taught me, just given me even more respect for single parents. Most of the single parents out there raising kids are women, but men too. But it's just given me tremendous respect for single parents. But I want to say to all the fathers out there, man, do whatever you can to be a father to your child. And mothers, single mothers, if you've had beef issues with the father of your children, don't make that keep you from letting them be in the life of your child. I mean, unless they're criminal, still involved in crime, or abusive to the kids or something like that. But if they legitimately want to do the right thing and you be in their child's life, you should let them. even though you've got beef with them, because there's nothing like having a father. And I'm loving that we're seeing this in Michael Jordan's life. I know in my life, man, look, my dad is 5'6". Like when I was growing up, 125 to 130 pounds. But to me, he was Superman. To me, he was the strongest dude in the world, okay? I loved feeling his muscles. And I mean, that's how powerful a father is. So brothers out there, do whatever you can. Brothers and men in general, do whatever you can to be a great father to your child. And if your dad wasn't there, I say take a page from LeBron James's book, how he's obviously turned into a wonderful father. Didn't have that example in his life, but he took what he wished he had and he's given it to his children. So that's the first lesson, the power of a father, which really runs throughout episodes 7 and 8. Number 2, the second lesson from episode 7, Magic. This is one most people are not going to see this. Magic and Bird were to Michael what Michael is or was to Kobe and LeBron. And here's why I say that. The reason Michael Jordan, we even saw it in last week when he was saying, in the Dream Team, we saw Magic and Bird. They were the standard. They were, winning more MVPs than Jordan when they were in the league. Bird won 3 straight, and Jordan was in the league at least 2 of those years, I believe. Magic was winning more MVPs while he played and Jordan played than Mike did. And so they were winning, obviously, more championships. And those were the guys that Jordan was compared to when he was lighting the league up with 37 points a game, 35 points a game, 32 points, 8 assists, 8 rebounds a game, but losing in the playoffs to the Pistons and maybe other teams. People were ripping Jordan. He's not Larry. He's not Magic. Oh, sure, he can put up these numbers, but he's not. They win. They could do it if they wanted to. They'd just rather win. So those were the standard bearers for him. So when he won 3, you saw when he told Mark Vancil, who had written his book, Rare Air. Mark Vancil, the author, said that at the Olympics in 92, after Michael had won his second ring, he told Vancil, I'm about to retire and go play baseball. I'm going to shock the world. And he told Vancil, the reason I'm not doing it now is because Magic and Bird never won 3 straight. I want to win 3 straight, then I'm out. And so that was his standard, to beat those 2. And he did. When he won his 3rd ring in the first three-peat, they became the first team, the Bulls, to win at least 3 straight championships since Bill Russell's Celtics had won 7 straight, I believe, from 59 to 1966. After that point, in those almost 30 years, no one had won 3 straight. The Lakers had a great achievement when they won 2 straight in 87 and 88. And then, of course, the Bad Boys did it again with 2 straight. So that was what Jordan was seeking. And we saw in Kobe that he wanted to be like Mike. I'm sure he would have loved to have surpassed Mike in championships won. Obviously, he got 5. He fell 1 short. But that was the guy that Kobe was going after, trying to be better than, like Jordan with Magic and Bird. And then LeBron. I mean, LeBron said it a few years ago after they beat Golden State, I'm chasing that ghost in Chicago. So Magic and Bird were that for Jordan. He was chasing him. And once he passed them and won 3 straight, then he felt like, hey, I've achieved what I need to achieve. And he walked away from basketball. I thought it was also interesting that, a lot of times when you debate the GOAT, the rings always come into it. But Jordan, even after only 3, I say only 3, but a 3-peat, and he had 3 championships, you saw he was widely, and I remember it, he was widely viewed as the greatest ever, as the GOAT. they had already put him ahead of Wilt Chamberlain. They had already put him ahead of Kareem and Magic and Bird and everybody. He was viewed with only 3 championships as the GOAT because he had dominated individually with the numbers, and then he won as well, broke conventional wisdom, which was that you couldn't build a dynasty around a 2-guard. You couldn't lead the league in scoring and win championships. So he was viewed, you saw Tom Brokaw referred to him as the greatest player that's ever lived. Robin Roberts at one point referred to him as the greatest player of all time. Jerry Reinsdorf, okay, maybe he was biased, he's the owner of the Bulls. He referred to him as the greatest player of all time. So, and then when they built the statue out in front of the United Center, they called him the greatest there ever was, the greatest there ever will be. Put that on your bucket list. Go see that statue in Chicago. It's tremendous. I think that's Craig Elo getting yoked on. But it was interesting that, the 6 rings always comes into the GOAT conversation, but he was viewed as that after just 3 because he was so gosh darn dominant. All right, the third thing, why MJ got away with being such a tough teammate. I mean, you saw him calling his teammates names. They talked about the fight with Kerr, which I'll get into from the next episode. But here's why he was able to get away with it. Because, I've covered the NBA since 1995. So that's 25 years. And I've seen star players, try to lead like MJ. Because we may have seen some footage we didn't see before, but it was known how hardcore Jordan was with his teammates. And so a lot of guys, I've seen stars in the past that I covered, try to lead like Michael Jordan and try to be so hardcore on their teammates, and it didn't work. And one reason I think it didn't work is because even though as Jordan was so hard on his teammates, his goal was always to win. It was really to build them up and prepare them for the battles they'll face in the playoffs. It wasn't just, I'm going to establish myself as the man in this locker room. It wasn't, I just want to be the baddest dude in the locker room. I want to be the baddest dude on the team. It wasn't selfish. It was, this is what it takes for us to win. Now, whether you believe that's the case or not, maybe there's another way. There obviously are other ways to lead. But to Jordan, that is what was necessary for him to build up his team so they could win championships. And again, it worked. One reason, because I believe they understood it was because he's doing this to make us better. He's doing it to make us better. And, I'm sure all players get along with their teammates to some degree off the court. Most, I should say. But he also, you could see off the court, he laughed, joked with guys and, show that he's cool with them. But they feared him. And that's a heck of a thing to say, that grown men feared another grown man. Half of them were bigger than him, and they still feared him. The second reason it worked was because he was so good. Period. That's the bigger reason, is that he was so good, it was working. You saw Bill Wennington say it. He was right. It worked. We won. Now, you got to be good enough to win championships if you're going to drive your teammates that hard. Because they got to a point where they're like, yo, we aren't the stars, but we're a part of the circus. We get the love too at the hotels. We get the love too on the road. We get the love too maybe with different little endorsements or all the benefits that came from being a championship team, a player on the championship team, a starter on the championship team, part of the Michael Jordan caravan. That came along with it. So you jump on board. Hey, he's hard on his, but it's some fringe benefits up in this mug. Okay, so that's another reason. And we even saw it with Jordan. When he went to Washington later in his career, his third comeback, or second comeback, I guess, he wasn't as good. He was still very good, legitimate all-star, but he wasn't good enough to lead them to championships or even the playoffs. but he still was hard driving. And I was there. I covered the end of that run for the New York Times. Those players hated Jordan. I mean, hate might be strong. They disliked him strongly. Guys who had grown up admiring him, poster on their wall, trying to be like Mike, couldn't stand the brother because he didn't change. He was the same old Mike. He just wasn't great enough anymore to lead you to championship. So you future ballers out there, know this. If you're going to be that type of leader, and this goes for any area of endeavor, then you better be delivering the goods. You better be winning awards. You better be making the company money. You better be the best, because that's the only reason other grown men gonna put up with it. All right, the fourth thing for episode 7, Pippen was the perfect number 2. Scottie Pippen is a great player, top 50 player of all time, of course, and he showed it. That year without Mike, he showed. That's when, in my mind, I began to recognize him as a great player in his own right. Now, I do think that, obviously, on those championship teams in the first three-peat, he was very good individually. But without Mike, he showed that he was legitimately a top 5, 10 player in the NBA on his own. And so, and I'm going to say this too. We saw what Jordan was saying with Scott Burrell, how hard he pushed him. I've always felt this, just as a guy that wasn't even covering the NBA at this time, watching Scottie develop with the Bulls. I remember just as a high school reporter who would watch the games saying, man, this dude is benefiting from playing with Michael Jordan. Not because Jordan draws double and triple teams and it makes it lighter on Scottie on the court. No, the work that Jordan was leading Scottie to put in off the court, the way Scottie was developing and improving as a player every single year, I could see it. And I was like, it's almost like I see him mimicking parts of Mike's game. And so Jordan's pushing of Scottie, challenging Scottie, pushing him to be great. All of that helped Scottie realize the potential that was within him. And I'm not sure Scottie would have become that guy without Mike. Another reason Scottie was the perfect number 2 was because you saw that he wasn't a number 1. As great as he was the year Jordan was gone, what he pulled in that series with the Knicks, staying on the bench, I mean, that was the ultimate selfish act. And you saw it, Steve Kerr called it, Bill Cartwright. I mean, they all called it. Horace Grant, you couldn't help. Horace Grant wasn't with him, but you couldn't help but call that. And obviously Scottie regrets it, although I can't believe he said if I had to do over again, I would do it the same way. I hope, one thing I hear a lot of people, and I'm saying athletes, I'm sure other people say it, but I hear a lot of athletes and entertainers say, I never regret anything. I never have any regrets. Stop it. You Jesus Christ? You never had no regrets? You never did anything wrong? You never look back, man, I wish I hadn't done that. Of course, we all have regrets. Doesn't make you a bad person. Doesn't make you worse than anybody else. We all have regrets. I got regrets. It's not, it doesn't take away from your manhood that you have regrets. And don't get me, well, because I learned from it. That's great. Turn that negative into a positive. And yes, we can learn from our mistakes. But I still, and I'm sure you have too, done things I wish I had never done. I regret. And so stop it with the, I never regret anything. Come on, please. Because you want to be held to that type of standard? Really? You want to be held to the standard of perfection? Stop it. All right, so Scottie, that showed, though, that he would not go out on the court. You can even maybe understand why you're upset. And you still go out on the court, though, and run the play, but you pissed. And you deal with Phil after, talk to him after, whatever. But that showed that you weren't built to be the number 1. You were built to be the number 2. Because when you tried to step into the number 1 role and the play wasn't called for you, you went off the handle. And so that showed that. And I think today, and not just today, but throughout NBA history, there have been guys who are great players, all-time great players, but they're not built to be number one. They're built to be number two, but they're in the number one position. And that's why you see some great players, their teams never play up to their potential, or their teams never are that good, even though they're very talented as an individual, because they're not built to be the number one. They're built to be a number two. Okay, so that's what we saw in Scottie. He's not alone. It doesn't take away from his all-time greatness, his Hall of Fame career and all that, but he was a number two and one of the best that we've ever seen do it. All right, let's move on to episode 8. The first lesson from episode 8, Jordan's unmatched competitiveness. I mean, that, this is going to be brief. The dude, the LeBradford Smith story, I love that Mike Wilbon and David Aldridge told it, because that was it. He made it up. He made it up. That LeBradford said, nice game, Mike. Even if LeBradford had said, LeBradford Smith, and for those who don't know, he was a great player I believe he's at Louisville. I'm 99% sure, but he was a great player in college at Louisville. And so Mike, just that competitiveness, man, was something unlike we've seen before. And you're seeing it in this. I'm going to move quickly to the next one. The comeback year from baseball. Now, my beloved friend and colleague at FS1, Nick Wright, he'll be on First Things First tomorrow, I'm sure. I wish I'd be on with him, but I told you I'm going to the burial for my father-in-law, so I'm off tomorrow. But Nick's going to be up there. Jordan lost. I thought Jordan never lost. Chris Broussard and Skip Bayless and all these guys say he never lost. We saw it. Did that happen? He's going to make a mockery of it. What Michael Jordan did in those 17 games back in the regular season and then in the playoffs is, even though they lost, it really wasn't a failure. It really showed his greatness. I mean, this dude took a year and a half off from basketball. Not playing basketball at all. Playing baseball, and you saw the work ethic. I mean, they said he was working his tail off, and shout out to Mike, because, Jerry Reinsdorf, the owner of the White Sox, and Terry Francona, great manager, great manager in major leagues now, was in the minors, managed Mike, said he'd have got to the major leagues. He had 252 in the Arizona Fall League. He was improving dramatically. And that's incredible, a testament to his great athleticism, that he could sit out from 17 to 31 in baseball and get back within a year and a half. And he's got people saying they think he would have made it to the majors. So that's a testament to him. But the fact that he could be out so long working on another sport, and Tim Grover's a great trainer. I know Tim well. Talked about it. We built his body for another sport. And you could see it. I remember, and again, this was the 95, 96. I was, covering the league the year. No, I wasn't covering it the year he came back. And I remember watching, obviously, his games, and his body was different. You could see it. It was not the same type of build. I mean, still obviously was in good shape somewhat, because obviously he got tired, but you could just see his body did not look the same. It didn't look quite as cut up, defined, sinewy as before. It just looked different. And you could see it. And yet and still, he put 55 on the Knicks in his 5th game back. The Knicks, who were a tremendous defensive team. And yet and still, 2nd game back, he hits a game winner, buzzer beater against Atlanta. I mean, and then to go 6 games with Shaq, Penny, y'all don't know. Y'all young kids, I'm going to have to do a young kid, you kids don't know on Penny. Penny, this is before the injury. Penny Hardaway was a superstar of the highest order at this time. As high as anybody got below Jordan. He had the commercials with Tyra Banks and Chris Rock and Little Penny and the dope foam posit sneakers. I mean, I think he had the foam posit, but he had some dope Nikes. You know, he was endorsing Nike. But Penny was the man. Penny would have been a Hall of Famer if he hadn't had the injuries. And him and Shaq, and I know Shaq wasn't as smart as he was later in his career, but he was as physically dominant and more athletic. And so Shaq wasn't no joke. Nick Anderson was a bad boy at that time. Horace Grant. You know, I mean, that was a team. And he went 6 with them after really not being in any type of basketball shape and his body being all built for another sport. Incredible. And those of you who play multiple sports, I know a lot of the young kids, you specialize nowadays, but I grew up playing, I went from football, and then I'd go to basketball, and then I'd go to baseball. My whole life from 8 years old up through high school. And I'm telling you, when we would move from football to basketball, your muscles that you worked were totally different. And you were incredibly sore, even though you were in good physical shape, because you're working different muscles. And then when we go to basketball, to baseball, same deal. So that was incredible that Mike could even lift that team to those heights, coming back from a year and a half playing baseball. And then the Steve Kerr situation. This is a lesson. There's several teaching moments in this with Michael, this documentary. One, you know, I won't go through it because I don't want to take up too much time. But one is Steve Kerr standing up to Michael Jordan. Even though he got his butt kicked, you know, he stood up to Mike. And so that earned Michael's respect. And I got to say this, because you're seeing on the documentary, Michael Jordan's not one to apologize for many things. But he apologized. He knew he was wrong. And I like that he apologized that. And that's, again, don't be afraid to have a regret. But he said, I beat up the littlest dude on the team. You don't feel good about that. And I'm glad that he handled it afterwards the way he did. But Steve Kerr gained his respect. So what I say to you guys is you got to have heart, man. You got to stand up for yourself. You got to show your heart. Even if you're going to get beat, you got to show your heart and your courage. It might not even be physically, but just stand up for yourself verbally or, you know, in your actions. Again, doesn't have to be a fight, but stand up for yourself. People will respect that. My wife, as some of you may know, my wife's a medical doctor, and she's a partner in her practice. And when I first met one of the partners, they told me that, actually, I'm sorry, this when she worked at the Cleveland Clinic. When we lived in Cleveland, she worked at the Cleveland Clinic, great hospital. Not one of her partners here in Jersey, but one of her colleagues, and a guy that was one of her supervisors at that time. I first met him, and he said, man, your wife is so strong. And she really showed me her strength and gained all of our respect when we had some type of assignment that had to be done, and they gave it to somebody else. And she thought she deserved to get it and was able to do it and qualified to do it. And she went to them. She went to the higher ups and told them, you know, I'm bothered that you didn't give me that assignment. I could have done it. I'm qualified. I know I was capable of doing it. And I just had to let you guys know that it bothered me. And that gained their respect, that she stood up for herself. And, you know, even though, you know, that's how you gain people's respect. You stand up for yourself, even if you lose, even if you get beat like Steve Kerr did, you stand up for yourself, and that you'll feel better about yourself, and the people you stand up to will respect you even more. The final thing, the 72-10 team was the greatest ever. And Steve Kerr, this is interesting when he said it. He said that was the best team he's ever been associated with. Now, these interviews were fairly recent. So that's after the great run he had with, and may have, we'll see what they do in the future, but the great run he had with the Warriors. not only the 73 win team that obviously didn't close it out, but the team before that won the championship and then had Kevin Durant, he still said that was the best team he was associated with. And again, for them to dismantle Shaq and Penny the way they did, swept them. That's incredible. I'm sorry. That's amazing that they did that. And Shaq and Penny were hungry too. They had just been to the finals and gotten beaten by Hakeem Olajuwon and Houston. I think they got swept in that series too. And so they were hungry to come back. Okay, we learned, and we were young. We were the young boys. Yeah, we took our lumps. Now we back. We seen how it works. Detroit took their lumps at the hands of Boston, then overcame. Chicago took their lumps at the hands of Detroit, then overcame. We took our lumps. That's right. We ready now, and they got swept. And so that was a great Bulls team. And I loved, and this is my last point, then I'll answer some questions. I loved that Jordan was laughing about Gary Payton saying he like gave Mike trouble. And shout out to GP. GP is was a tremendous player and was an incredible defender and deserving of his Hall of Fame and an all-time great point guard. And too many people sleep on him. He's the top 10 point guard of all time. And GP was awesome. But I remember watching that series. And I mean, this nonsense that Gary Payton turned the series around when he guarded Jordan and shut Jordan down. The Bulls were up 3-0. And you saw some of the highlights in the first few games. It wasn't like Payton never ended up on Jordan. He was on Jordan enough in the first several games. And Jordan was taking him to the bucket like everybody else. I remember when the Bulls were up 3-0 thinking, and then watching the next two games thinking, man, they coasted. They know it's over. They know it's over like the rest of us. Mike was taking a rest, and it obviously showed that he was heartbroken because he was thinking about his dad. But I mean, that notion never sat, well, oh, they put GP on. You know, like if GP had guarded him from the beginning of the series, oh, Seattle might have won. Stop it. Jordan was going to put 35, 36, whatever on GP, just like Hershey Hawkins and the rest of them. And that was a great Seattle team. Sean Kemp, Hershey Hawkins, Gary Payton, Detlef Shrimp, Sam Perkins, one of the first stretch 4 or 5s. I mean, that was a great team, but they were no match for the best team ever, the 96 Bulls. So there you have it, my takeaways. Woo! Let's get to the questions. Let's see what y'all got. All right, here we go. Who would benefit from saying the suspension was real? Like that Jordan, you know, obviously they just dealt with, which is another point. There are so many, I can't make every point, but I'm glad the way they dealt with that, the notion that he had been suspended, you know, from the league for gambling. Now, to answer, I believe what was said, and I've believed it ever since, that he wasn't suspended. He simply stepped away. I mean, you saw him tell Mark Vancil a year before, I'm leaving to play baseball. You saw him say, talking with his dad, their last conversation was, I want to, you know, they were talking about, you know, I want to go play baseball. And his dad was saying, you should go. There's no way Michael Jordan would have lied on his dad like that. I mean, come on. Do I have proof of that? No, but I'm just saying, like, who could do that? Who would lie about your last conversation with your father and, you know, when he died the way he did? And I mean, I just can't see that, as much as he admired his dad. And so, you say who would benefit from it? I mean, I believe leaks would have come out. It would have been out by now that if Jordan was indeed suspended, it would have somehow leaked. Richard Esquinas, who was the guy that Jordan owed a lot of money to, over $1 million from gambling debts on the golf course. He wrote a book, if not more. And so he Am I all right? Did I lose it? Did I go over? Is it? I'm good. Okay. My screen has changed. But anyway, okay. So my point is that if there like people are asking why did this even come up? If you could prove if there was proof out there, which I haven't seen any, but if there was proof that Jordan's gambling debts were so high that he would have trouble paying them, then you could say, okay, were his debt so high that he could be, somebody could threaten him to point shave because he owes so much money. That's why people thought maybe the NBA would have suspended him, and make it, go away because maybe in their investigation they found out some evidence, of that his debts were so high that he could be a threat to point shave or that he did point shave. And that instead of exposing him, they would tell him to go away and let it die down for a year and a half. That was the theory, but which like I said, I don't believe. I've never believed. I've never seen any evidence of that. But that's why, as you said, as you asked the question, who would benefit from saying that? That was That was the reason for the speculation out there. What's another question? How do we view Mike after watching this documentary? I think he's going to gain even more. I mean, his legacy, as great as it already is, I think will just grow even more. I think he'll gain fans. I know he was concerned about will people think I'm a bad guy or a horrible guy and all this. I think you're seeing the heart of a champion, the competitiveness of a champion, a guy who was flawed, who wasn't perfect. Like, none of us are perfect. And I think it's nice that you're seeing some of that too. He's addressing every potential scandal head on. He addressed the gambling head on. He addressed how he dealt with his teammates head on. He addressed the talk of was he suspended head on. He addressed the Jordan Rules book head on. I love it. The Dream Team with Isaiah head on. So he's addressing all those. And I know he wanted to get his viewpoint out there before some others told the story and maybe told it a different way. So I think he's done great with that. I think he'll gain more fans. And let me say this, like you saw his practice habits, how he would compete and go hard every day. And I've talked to players from that era, and they were like, look, our practices, back in the day, we practiced. Like we went 5-on-5 at practice virtually every day. It wasn't like today they rest a lot more. We went at it in practice, and you saw that. And it's just I think this younger generation is going to look at a lot of these guys that do, and let's face it, not a lot of the guys do the load management, but those that do, I think a lot of guys, fans from the day are going to look at them and be like, yo, dude, load management? You paid to play 82 games. I love that Jordan said, or Tim Grover said of Jordan and why he worked so hard. He said, because remember when they lost to Orlando in 95, and Tim Grover said, all right, let me know when you want to see me. And Jordan said, I'll see you tomorrow. And Tim Grover said, Jordan's mentality was, if you're going to spend 3 hours of your night watching me, I want to be at my best for those 3 hours and give you the best of Michael Jordan. That may be the only time you get to see me in person. I want you to see the real Michael Jordan. And I feel I owe it to you to perform because you're paying your hard-earned money. You're taking out of your time. Maybe you're bringing a child. I'm obviously going further than Grover did, but maybe you're bringing your child to the game, only game he can ever go to see me. And if I'm healthy, I'm going to play. And if I'm going to play, I'm going to play my best. I hope that some of these load management guys learn from this. I mean, seriously. And some will tell you, well, if you load manage, you'll have a longer career. Well, Kevin Garnett didn't load manage ever, and he played 21 seasons. Kobe Bryant didn't load manage ever, and he played 20 seasons. Tim Duncan you know, I mean, heck, I don't even want to call. I know Popovich created load management, but my gosh, Duncan was still playing like 77 games a year. I don't call that load management. But he played obviously 20 some odd, 19, 20 years, whatever it was. And so I just hope that the young cats watching this that are in the league now will look at that and say, man, look, this is my job. You know, this is my job. And I'm getting paid to play. So let me play. If Michael Jordan could have that mentality, if Kobe Bryant could, and Kevin Garnett and others could have that mentality, then any player today could have that mentality. Next question. How many rings would Jordan have if he never played baseball? Wow. That's a good one. Because obviously the 2 years he was off, the Houston Rockets won both with Hakeem Olajuwon, who was tremendous. Here's the challenge, because I do think the Bulls were better than that Rockets team. And I do think the Bulls would have beaten that Rockets team. So I get, you know, but am I saying he would have won 8 straight? You could see how burnt out mentally Michael Jordan was after each three-peat, the first one and the second one. And I can understand why, because, and I've talked with even some of the Warriors players when they were building their dynasty recently. It is hard after you win a championship to remain motivated through the 82-game season. That's why Jordan made up the story about LeBradford Smith. I need junk to get me motivated on a Tuesday night in February in Utah or in Washington when they're horrible. They won 7 games all year. We playing them. The people want to show, golly, I need some motivation. Because for us, it really don't matter until May and June. So what's going to get me through the grind of an 82-game season? It's tough after you've won 1. Then if you win 2, it's tougher for the next year. Then you win 3. And golly, now you've eclipsed Magic and Bird. You're widely recognized as the greatest ever. There's no one criticizing you from a basketball standpoint. You vanquished Isaiah and all the rest of them. What's my motivation? So that's the only thing that would have stopped Jordan from winning 8 straight. And it did. He stepped away. He needed a break. And so from a basket, I think the Bulls were better than those Rockets teams. However, it's a lot to ask of a guy to win 8 straight championships in this day and age. Bill Russell, I know, won 7 straight, I said, and I think that's the number. It was a whole different day and age. The attention wasn't there. The competition wasn't as great. There's only a handful of teams. I mean, it just wasn't the same. LeBron went to 8 straight finals, which is a great achievement, but he lost most of them. He lost, 5 of them. So that's motivation. You know, I got to get back and win it this time. It's hard if you win 3 straight, 4 straight, 5 straight to keep coming back. It's hard to even fathom that he could have won 8 straight. But I think they were better than those Rockets teams. Any other questions we want to get to, or we're going to roll? All right, guys. Yes. All right. So look, a double dose tonight. We're going to show you my interview I did last week with Mark Jackson, who obviously was a very good player himself, faced Michael Jordan in 2 Game 7s, one with the Knicks, one with the Pacers, then went on to become a very good coach with the Golden State Warriors, built the foundation for them to go ahead and win their 3 championships, and now is a phenomenal broadcaster on ABC and ESPN. So I did an interview with him last week. We're going to show that now, so stay tuned for that. I hope you enjoyed my recap, and I'll check with you guys next week. Peace. All right, I'm here with Mark Jackson, the former great point guard. In fact, I've been doing these. You kids just don't know how good certain players were. I think I need to do one on Mark Jackson pretty soon.
Nobody cares.
Yo, you looking good, man. You look like you in the 70s or something like that. The beard, the hair.
I look like I'm an ABA star, right?
Have you been tempted to cut your own hair?
No, I haven't been tempted to cut my own hair. About, I want to say a month ago, I was tempted to have my barber come to the house, just thinking about it. Right. And then I was on the internet, and fortunately for me, but unfortunately, I was reading a story where a barber was making house calls and actually lost his life to the virus. So I'm sitting there like, nah, no way, it ain't working. Right. So my daughter lines this up, and that's it.
Well, like I said, thanks for joining us, man. And, we're going to talk a few things NBA. We'll get into The Last Dance with Michael Jordan. I'm sure you've been watching that. But one thing in watching that documentary, I've heard a lot of, whether it's millennials or Gen Z, I guess that's what the younger generation is called, some people criticizing the competition that Jordan went against, right? I don't know if you've heard this, but, I've heard people say, oh, that Knicks team that took them to 7, all they had was Patrick Ewing and role players and all that. I want to ask you, because a lot of teams back then did have like one Hall of Famer and then good players around them. Talk about like teams back then compared to teams today, but even more so, I think, Mark, and you got it, played and coached and calls the games. A team isn't made from just throwing together 3 stars, because that may not be a very good team. Talk about the makings of a team and why they shouldn't just say, oh, they only had one Hall of Famer. They couldn't have been that good.
Well, and I'm not a hater. This is a great brand of basketball that's being played today. But I've been fortunate and blessed enough to be able to experience as a fan, as a young kid, as a guy that played in the game, as a guy that coached the game, and a guy that covers the game. So I'm pretty much across the board. I will tell you this, being in the middle of those Jordan years that they show in The Last Dance, and when he was obviously the best player in the world, those teams were loaded, top to bottom. You may say some teams had only one Hall of Famer, but they certainly had, from top to bottom, battle-tested, proven guys. I look at my 92 Knicks team. The starting 5 we were in battles every single day, not in games, but in practice. If you look at a second unit that consists of Greg Anthony as a backup point guard, John Starks as a backup 2 guard, Johnny Newman, Anthony Mason as a backup 3, Eddie Lee Wilkins, who was an established, scoring guy off the bench. I mean, we had proven guys in our second unit from top to bottom that made it a dangerous team. Look at my Pacer team. Travis Best was the backup point guard, a guy that averaged 25 plus for a season and is a legit scorer by the name of Jalen Rose was our backup 2-3 guy. So we were low. Antonio Davis was our backup power forward. We had outstanding talent across the board. So I think I look at Milwaukee Bucks team that didn't win at all in a championship. The Seattle Supersonics, who didn't win a championship. I mean, talking about talent. It's not just one Hall of Famer. It is top to bottom loaded with extreme gifted guys that can flat out get it done on a nightly basis.
We do, like today, obviously people think of this as kind of the greatest era of point guards. And it's a great era, but I think a lot of it too is that we don't have a lot of big men that score anymore. You used to have 20-point scorers among big men on most teams. You would come down and you throwing post-entry passes. Now you hardly ever see that from a point. There's some that I don't even think know how to do a post-entry pass. Real talk. Is some of this era, not that the guys aren't great, but some of it's that, the point guard, they handle the ball more, they shoot the ball more, and a lot of them don't have front court guys that score. So that's why we see some of these historic numbers from these guys.
Well, it's a combination of all the above. There's some great point guards in this league today that would be great at any point in the history of this game. Give them their due and give them credit. At the same time, there were great point guards in my day that would be max players and superstars today. Understand the difference in the rules. Dennis Johnson would put his hand on your hip and it'd be a wrap. He can maneuver you wherever he wanted to defensively. He was elite at that. Hand strength and the ability to take the rules and use them to his advantage. Today's rules allow – can you imagine if you couldn't put a hand on Rod Strickland? Can you imagine if you allow him to get anywhere he wants to get? And I'm not talking about Rod Strickland's a great player, but he wasn't a superstar in those days. Right. He was an outstanding player. He would be a superstar in today's game because you can't touch him. So I think you look at a bunch of the point guards in those days, and I'm not hating again, but they would be tough to defend and they'd be household names because of the rules and the way that the game is played today.
Now, I've always said that, and a guy that's prominent in The Last Dance is Isaiah Thomas. And I've always said that he was the best small or below the rim player ever. And about a year ago, I amended that and I put Steph Curry ahead of him. You obviously coach Steph. Am I crazy? How do you feel about that? Steph ahead of Isaiah?
I'm not going to get into Steph and Isaiah just because it'll be blown out of proportion. But what I will say is the second best point guard that I've ever witnessed in the history of this game is Isaiah Thomas. Going against him as a player, watching him as a fan, I think he's portrayed in a bad light in The Last Dance, and we take away from his absolute greatness. Think about it. The guy dominated with the Detroit Pistons. They won back-to-back championships. He was the best player on the team. And he had, another Hall of Famer in Joe Dumars. But just like you just finished talking about, when you think of Hall of Fame and top-notch guys, you don't immediately think of Joe Dumars with all due respect. But he was a nightmare to defend. He was an outstanding defender. And he was a great, great basketball player. But Isaiah Thomas, make no mistake about it, was the man. And I truly believe doesn't get enough credit. I can remember as a young kid playing at St. John's University, going to a Knick Detroit Piston game just to see Isaiah Thomas. I'm standing in the tunnel as he's warming up before everybody, not a layup line warm-up, but an individual workout. And he looks over to me, stops his warm-up, and comes over and says, "Young fella, I love your game. You're going to be a heck of a player." And I'm sitting there like, Zeke just talked to me? And he just doesn't get enough credit. And the same way that we point to Michael Jordan and let him off the hook because of his competitive desire and his competitive spirit, well, let's give that same thing to Isaiah Thomas because he had it also. Now, he didn't do everything right, but sometimes we can point the finger to a competitive spirit instead of just flat out evil.
Were you, when he wasn't on that dream team, I know you had, just been in the league a few years, but were you shocked? Like, what was your reaction to that?
He deserved it. He deserved it. And there's no debate about it. Anybody who says that Isaiah Thomas, at that a two-time champ and the best point guard in the league, didn't deserve it. This guy won everywhere he went. He won in college. Right. He won in the pros. He deserved that. And I was watching an interview, and you can see and feel the pain in his voice and in his eyes when he said the only thing missing on my resume was a gold medal, the right to represent my country and win a gold medal. That was stripped from him. And I think it was wrong. Obviously, it's the greatest team ever assembled, but they're not the greatest team that ever could have been assembled.
Yeah, I think the argument, I think it's pretty clear cut. After Michael, Magic, and Bird, Isaiah should have been the next guy on that team. Because it wasn't just at that point in their career where they were. It was what they had done historically. Because Bird was kind of coming to the end, and Magic was even out of the league,
Yeah, I totally agree. Bird, his body had, his body wasn't the same, so he wasn't the same player. So it was almost like, and he deserved to be on that team. Right. Magic, pretty much the same thing, out of league, but he's Magic. So you left. But I think in the order that you said, I would say it was Michael, then it was Isaiah, because he was still in his prime years. And then all of those guys deserved to be on it. Whichever order you want to give to them, they deserved it.
Do you have a top 5 list of point guards?
I don't have a top 5 list of point guards. I think you can bunch a whole lot of guys in there, Steph Curry included. But, you think about Jason Kidd, John Stockton, Gary Payton, Steve Nash, Oscar Robertson, Magic Johnson, obviously. And you think about there's just so many guys. It's just, what do you want from the point guard position? Do you want scoring? Do you want facilitating? Do you want playmaking? Do you want leadership? But I certainly start my list with Magic Johnson, clearly the greatest point guard that's ever played the game. And then it would be Isaiah Thomas, and you can go wherever you want from there.
Who would you say are the best 3 or 5 players that you played against?
Off the top of my head, Michael Jordan's number one. Kobe Bryant would be in the discussion for number two. Shaquille O'Neal. Isaiah Thomas, Magic Johnson. I go across the board. And I played my final year was LeBron's first year. So it wasn't like he was the greatest player, but I did play against him. So he's got to be in that five, no matter where you put him.
It's interesting because when the media discusses the GOAT conversation, it's always LeBron and Michael Jordan. But when I've talked to former players, most of the ones I've talked to that face both LeBron and Kobe, they put Kobe ahead of LeBron. Or they say he's got to be right there with those two in that discussion. Why do you think Kobe doesn't kind of get that love, I guess, from the media as far as, being ahead of LeBron or right there with him?
Well, I think we look at LeBron's body of work, and I think when it's all said and done, as a professional career, LeBron James will have the greatest professional career. Now, that's not saying he's the best player ever, but career-wise, he will lead the game if we continue to play and he stays healthy. He will lead the game, the all-time leading scorer, and the top 5 assist man in the history of the game with championships and a whole lot of different accolades that we don't have time to go through. But that's the reason that he would get the edge to the media or to the common fan. I think where Kobe Bryant gets the edge is, again, there's only 2 guys I've ever seen on a basketball floor with a mentality where they would be willing to die on the court and do whatever it takes. And that's with all due respect to some great guys with a competitive drive. But I'm talking about willing to leave it all on the line. That's Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. So if you ask me who I'm taking with my life on the line, I know that those 2 dudes are going to be willing to die. I'm taking those 2 dudes. But LeBron, I have no argument against him being in discussion with anybody that's ever played.
You faced Jordan. You played 2 Game 7s against Jordan, one in 92 with the Knicks and 98 with the Pacers. What was it like facing him? I mean, we're getting a glimpse of how tenacious he was. What was it like, though, to be on the court going against him?
The crazy thing is, and you get a laugh at this because you witnessed it covering games, but it's the simple things. As soon as the lights go out during introductions and you hear it's like, oh my! You had to remind me. It's about to be on. It's the greatness on the offensive end and on the defensive end. The ability to be the best player in the world on both sides of the floor. The ability to impose his will on the basketball game. Understanding, just like against the bad boys, we had a mindset. We were taking them out, and not to hurt them, but to send a message. That was the brand of basketball that we were playing. And we understood, okay, once we do it, we go down the lane, we're going to get hit. So it's okay. But it didn't matter to him. What mattered to him is getting to the finish line and winning. Just an appreciation truly for his greatness. And in fairness to that Bulls team, we were better early on. Michael Jordan, because think about it, he had to develop and allow Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant to mature to have that mindset. Right. He single-handedly beat us a couple of times in the postseason, and until they grew and developed and matured. And then I think just like in the Last Dance, I thought Isaiah didn't get enough credit. I don't think Scottie Pippen gets enough credit for how great he was as a basketball player. Sure, Michael was the best, and he certainly was the focal point, but he had to have a Robin to his Batman, and Scottie Pippen was incredible.
Well, Pip, you guys, we've seen a lot about, you mentioned the bad boys, how hard they played and how physical they were. I think you guys were, like you said, y'all played very similar to them and were just as physical and maybe, if not more, with the Bulls.
Well, yeah, that is true. We were, our guards didn't have the mindset. Their guards in the bad boys was Isaiah and Joe. They had to defend, but also at the same time, they had to try to be intimidators, but they had to save some of the gas in their tank for the offensive end because they carried the load. With us, that wasn't the fact. And then our front line were absolute bruisers, and Patrick and Charles Oakley and Xavier McDaniels and Anthony Mason. We had guys that would absolutely beat you up on a nightly basis and take pride in it. So we took some of the things that they were able to do and be effective against not just the Bulls, but against teams in the NBA. And Pat Riley did a great job of changing our identity and getting us to believe that this was going to be the brand of basketball that we had to play in order to maximize our potential.
Now, I guess this next episode, episode 7, the producer, Jason Harris, said he was surprised Jordan even allowed them to show this one because I guess he's going hard at teammates in practice and stuff. Did you guys know that how hard he was on his teammates being in the league? Did you know he was going at them like that?
A little bit. You know, you get guys that played for him, you know, whether it be Charles Oakley played with the Bulls, and then all of a sudden we traded for Charles Oakley. So we had an inside view of what was going on the other side. But he was a competitive guy, and it just wasn't when the lights were on. It was when the lights were off. And that's what separated, you know, again, Michael and Kobe. They wanted to destroy you, whether it was practice or game situations. So I think I'm not surprised that he's allowing it. He allowed it to be, you know, shown. I think it's a situation where he's given us the privilege of getting an inside look at just what made him tick, because for so long we didn't know. We had questions, we assumed, but this is, in a weird sense, is a way of him saying, thank you. You know, it's a crazy mentality, but he's giving us, he's moving the curtain out the way. And it's fascinating TV for me. You were undoubtedly the team leader of the teams you played on. What was your leadership style like? Well, I was fortunate to have best players. Let's just take, for example, the Knicks teams and the Bulls team. Patrick Ewing was our best player in New York. Reggie Miller was our best player in Indiana. Both of those guys were leaders, but they were not leaders in the sense of being vocal. They were leaders in the sense of being great players, being great examples, being great workers, great competitors, and they allowed me to be the voice. And they followed, you know, it wasn't like I was trying to steal their shine. They understood they needed it just like I needed them to take over games, because that wasn't what I did best. So it was just holding guys accountable and pretty much being a coach on the floor. And that's why my mindset has always been, if you find me a great point guard, not to say I was, but if you find me a great point guard who is an extension of the coach on the floor, I'll hire him tomorrow as my head coach, because he basically has coaching experience. I don't need Chris Paul to go sit behind Greg Popovich as an assistant coach for 2 years or 3 years to learn the ropes. He's been carrying organizations for, you know, however many years he's been in the league. And I think that's ultimately the sign of a great point guard, being a true extension of the coach on the floor, where the coach doesn't have to call a timeout. He doesn't have to call every set play. He doesn't have to get the feel of the game. But that point guard understands the pulse of exactly what's going on. And he's trusted.
It's interesting you bring that up, because obviously that was your mentality. You know, before you became a head coach, you did a great job with Golden State. How confident are you that you'll get a job coming up? I mean, it seems like every job that's open, I mention your name on TV. Like, I think and I feel like I'm saying he'll fit every job, but I thought there's many out there that you'd be great for. And one I think is Brooklyn, obviously with KD and Kyrie. How confident are you after, you know, you haven't gotten so many of these jobs that you got a shot at getting that one or another one soon?
Well, I'm confident that if you were hiring or if I was hiring, I'd get a job. That's understood right there. So I appreciate the love, and certainly it hasn't gone unnoticed. But at the end of the day, there's 30 jobs. And I think 3 years in Golden State, the privilege of coaching those guys and turning things around as an organization, it was a lot of fun, and relationships that'll last a lifetime. To have the privilege of coaching a Steph Curry or Klay Thompson or Draymond Green or anybody that came throughout those hallways for those 3 years was a blast. So I think when you think about it, that team made the playoffs one time in 19 years prior to me becoming the head coach. And it wasn't because of anything I did. I'm not taking the credit, but it's something that we did collectively to turn the tide and put that team in position to be a dynasty. There's 30 teams in this league. There are teams certainly in position where they're looking to change gears and become relevant and put themselves in position to win. I like the body of work that I have, and I look forward to the next opportunity in coaching. But I certainly do want to coach again, and I'm excited about what lies ahead.
Now I've been, now I'm used to it, but initially I was almost amazed by your ability to go to Golden State and call the games, for ABC and ESPN the way you did with the situation there. You were able to stay unbiased and, you know what I mean, like really handle yourself well there. And, like many people, and I know you've given Steve Kerr credit, and I've given him a lot of credit. I mean, what he's done is great. But I was talking to somebody in their organization a few years ago, and they brought up something I really hadn't thought about. And it was that when you coached him, obviously Draymond was coming off the bench, and David Lee was a starter. And Kerr's plan was to do the same thing, have, Draymond coming off the bench. And they were trying to figure out how are we even going to use him. We got David Lee's not starting. And, of course, David Lee gets hurt. Draymond becomes a starter, and the rest is history. Again, not to take anything away from Steve Kerr, but do people underestimate that change and how that also propelled the Warriors more, as much, if not more so, than the coaching change?
No, I think the coaching change – Steve Kerr has done and did an incredible job. He'll be the first to tell you in his own record that David Lee was going to be a starting power forward. Like you talked about, David Lee got hurt, and Draymond Green, it opened the door for him, and he ran with it, and that team elevated their level of play. And the things that Draymond does on a nightly basis put you in position to win ball games. So Steve Kerr has acknowledged that. During my time as a coach, and I don't want to get into all of that. But at the end of the day, I was encouraged to have a big guy on the floor. So having David Lee and Draymond Green playing on the floor as the center wasn't something that was totally bought into at the time. Folks won't want to admit it now. Who knows? But I don't have a history of lying, and I'm not going to get into covering myself. At the end of the day, I'll say that Steve Kerr has done an incredible job. That team will go down as an all-time great team, one of the ones in the discussion. They've accomplished a lot, and they're far from finished, and I had nothing but great times there.
If we come back as we wrap up for this season, I've heard two schools of thought. One, it benefits the Lakers and LeBron more because they've got, he's 35 in his 17th year and he's getting all this rest. And two, that it benefits the Clippers more because Kawhi Leonard and Paul George get rest and they'll probably come back 100% healthy. Do you think it benefits one of those two teams more than the other?
I think anybody that acts like they know which one it benefits more is just, creating some content for whatever show they're on. Because at the end of the day, we don't know. LeBron could be chilling, sipping wine, doing nothing. We assume he's not, and we see the videos where he's working his tail off. But guys are not just going to jump back into playing and pick up where they left off. That's not the way it works as a professional athlete. I'm speaking from experience as being a former professional athlete. There's nothing that can duplicate playing on the court. I don't care how many machines you get on. I don't care how many times you jog up and down a track and field. I don't care how many times you play pickup ball. It's not the same thing as playing basketball in a 5-on-5 competitive situation environment. I thought a couple of teams in the Eastern Conference and in the West, it mattered who you matched up with. It'd be very interesting. I look forward to if things obviously turn for the better and we're in position to finish this season. I thought it would go down as one of the greatest we've ever seen.
To what you said, they got to play like 5 to 7 regular season games, don't they, to let these guys develop a chemistry again and get in game shape?
I think you have to, but to his credit, Commissioner Adam Silver has done an incredible job. And I sincerely mean that. In a time where everybody was still open for business and doing whatever they wanted to do, he was the first to say we're shutting down and closing up the doors and making sure that the safety of our players, our fans, and the people involved are first and foremost. He started it, set the tone as a leader, and there's other organization, leagues, and the country in general followed. But he did a very smart thing in shutting it down. And I give him credit because obviously he's making sure that it's going to be right before we turn it on again. And I think that's the best thing because I said yesterday on the show, winning a championship is being healthy and whole. Forget about the jewelry. Give me my health and wholeness. And I think that has to be first and foremost on the minds of everybody.
Last question, Mark. If we do come back, who's your favorite? Clippers, Lakers, Bucks?
I think the Bucks are the favorite in the East. They can be beaten. They're the favorite, but they can be beaten in the East. In the West, I think the favorites are the Lakers and the Clippers. But if I'm the Rockets and I'm playing the Lakers, I believe I have a legitimate chance because I can outscore them. Not saying they'll beat them, but I think that's the interesting chess moves that's going to take place, especially in the Western Conference playoffs.
Mark, great stuff, man. I appreciate your time. We took you all the way around the league, past, present, everything. So thanks for your time, man.
You sure did, man. I appreciate you, man. Stay safe and keep up the awesome work.
Yep, you too. All right, thanks.